Donald Trump shared a post on Truth Social calling for Democratic members of Congress to be hanged. He also posted a message that said, seditious behavior, punishable by death. Let's be crystal clear. The President of the United States is calling for the execution of elected officials. This is an outright threat, and it's deadly serious. We have already seen what happens when Donald Trump tells his followers that his political opponents are enemies of the state. Every time Donald Trump posts things like this, he makes political violence more likely. None of us should tolerate this kind of behavior.
What's up, folks? Adam is back. So what just happened, guys? Congress has issued Trump a 48-hour ultimatum. Resign voluntarily or face immediate impeachment under House Resolution 415. The coalition behind it is bipartisan. 120 House members, 37 senators, and 250 co-sponsors already locked in, representing a clear House majority. If the numbers hold, conviction in the Senate is within reach. For the first time, this isn't a threat. The votes exist. The deadline is real. Resign or be removed.
Congressional Democrats are now calling for President Trump's removal from office following his extreme threats against Iran. They say the ceasefire isn't enough and are calling for Congress to rein in the Trump administration.
Well, a 2-week ceasefire is insufficient. We need a permanent end to Donald Trump's reckless war of choice. House Democrats have demanded that Speaker Mike Johnson immediately reconvene the House back into session so we can move a war powers.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Yesterday, more than 70 lawmakers in separate posts on social media suggested the president's cabinet must invoke the 25th Amendment and admit he's unfit for office. Congress should pass impeachment articles and vote to convict him, or both. During his first term, he was impeached twice and acquitted. We reached out to state lawmakers or those who represent California to pose our accountability question asking, do you support President Trump's actions in Iran or oppose them? Here's what they told us. California Senator Adam Schiff says, quote, Congress must finally reclaim its war power from this increasingly dangerous president before more service members get killed.
Now, what pushed Congress to this unprecedented moment? What finally shattered the dam and created this bipartisan tidal wave? It was a bombshell congressional hearing that exposed everything simultaneously. A classified memorandum was leaked, and what it contained was absolutely devastating. The memo revealed in explicit detail that Trump had deliberately delayed critical military operations for one reason and one reason only: to secure political endorsements from certain governors and political leaders. Trump was literally holding military operations hostage, dangling them like a bargaining chip, pending political support from specific individuals.
We're just getting some breaking news here about the war. The president has just issued a Truth Social from the White House saying this: based on conversations with Prime Minister Sharif and Field Marshal Munir of Pakistan, and wherein they requested that I hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran and subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran, agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. The reason for doing so is that we have already met and exceeded all military objectives and are very far along with a definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East.
He was using the United States military, our armed forces, our men and women in uniform, as leverage for his personal political gain. If you're searching for a definition of treason-level conduct, this is it. This is using the military as a political tool, as a transaction, as something to be traded for endorsements. This is exactly what the Constitution explicitly prohibits and forbids. This strikes at the heart of civilian control of the military, the fundamental principle that keeps our democracy safe from authoritarian abuse. And when this memo was revealed during the hearing, something extraordinary happened.
Hours before the US launched these surprise attacks on the Houthi militant group in Yemen, the Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, had all the details right in front of him.
I'm sitting in a Safeway parking lot watching my phone and realizing, oh my God, this might be real. I think Pete Hegseth just sent this group actual targeting information, actual sequencing of an attack.
He'd been mistakenly invited to an encrypted group chat by Donald Trump's own national security advisor, Mike Waltz. It was there Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth posted the war plans.
Why would they do it on Signal? Why would they do this on a messaging app? And why would they invite the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic to watch? It's a level of recklessness that I have not seen in many years of reporting on national security issues.
Multiple House members from both parties stood up at their microphones and read the classified memo aloud, directly into the public record. They read classified military information publicly to expose what Trump was doing. Think about how significant that is. These are members of Congress who typically guard classified information with religious devotion. They follow security protocols to the letter. They understand the gravity of protecting sources and methods. They respect national security concerns deeply. But in this moment, they made a calculated decision that Trump's crimes were so egregious, so severe, so fundamentally dangerous to the Republic that classified information had to be released to the American people immediately. The public needed to know what their president was doing behind closed doors. That's not just a decision. That's democracy protecting itself from authoritarian abuse in real time. The military scandal became the thing that shattered the bipartisan logjam because military matters transcend partisan politics in America. Generals care about the Constitution. The Pentagon cares about civilian control of the military. The entire defense establishment cares about keeping the military out of political games. And when Trump was caught red-handed using military operations as political tools, even the most hardened Republican military hawks said enough. Even GOP members who had defended Trump through every previous scandal, every previous controversy, every previous investigation, finally drew a line in the sand. They stood up and said, "This crosses the line. This is indefensible. This is the moment we have to act." That's why this ultimatum carries the weight of both parties. That's why 37 senators from across the aisle are demanding Trump's resignation. 37 senators represents roughly a third of the entire Senate. And multiple reports are now confirming that 7 GOP senators have privately indicated they are willing to vote to convict and remove if this reaches a Senate trial. 7 Republican senators. That number is massive because it means the mathematical possibility of removal actually exists. Conviction requires 67 votes. Democrats hold 50 seats. With 7 Republicans, you reach 57. That's not the full 67 yet, but it's getting dangerously close. And with Congress issuing this public ultimatum, more Republicans could flip. More GOP senators could join the removal coalition as the pressure becomes unbearable. Meanwhile, Capitol Hill has descended into absolute chaos and turmoil. We're seeing unprecedented riots and civil unrest. Over 300 arrests are happening daily at the Capitol building. Trump supporters are being arrested on Capitol grounds for rioting, for violence, for making direct threats against members of Congress. They're actively storming the Capitol. They're demanding that representatives refuse and reject the resignation ultimatum. They're screaming at Congress to back down completely, to abandon the ultimatum immediately, to show loyalty to Trump above all else. But here's what's remarkable. Congress is absolutely refusing to back down under any circumstances. They're standing firm despite the riots. They're standing firm despite the direct threats against their lives and families. Congress is sending an unmistakable message that whatever happens with the rioters, whatever violence occurs on the streets, Trump has to resign. The institution will not be intimidated by mobs or threats or violence. Democracy doesn't bow to the angry crowd. And Trump himself? He's erupting on Truth Social. He's issuing threats against members of Congress who signed this ultimatum. He's promising to primary every Republican who dared put their name on the demand. He's vowing to destroy them politically, to end their careers, to make them pay for their disloyalty. But it goes beyond political threats. Trump is making statements that have triggered a Secret Service investigation. His posts are under active Secret Service investigation for threatening members of Congress. That's the level of desperation we're witnessing. The President of the United States is threatening the very people who are trying to save the constitutional order, and the Secret Service is now involved. Every post he makes is another piece of evidence. Every threat is another reason for senators to vote for removal. Trump is essentially arguing for his own conviction with every desperate message he sends. This ultimatum represents the absolute final moment in American politics. Congress has exhausted every single available option. They've tried everything imaginable. They sued Trump repeatedly in court, and the courts ruled against Trump every single time. They held congressional hearings, and Trump defied them completely. They impeached Trump before, and he survived that trial through technical procedural maneuvers. They've investigated Trump's conduct endlessly, exposing scandal after scandal after scandal. They've documented corruption and criminality repeatedly, and none of it worked. None of it stopped him. None of it changed his behavior. So now Congress is taking the simplest, most direct approach possible. Resign. They're giving Trump an ultimatum with a ticking clock. Resign within 48 hours, or Congress votes to remove you. That's it. That's the entire demand, simple and final. The 48-hour countdown has started right now. Trump has less than 2 days to make the most consequential decision of his life: resign from the presidency voluntarily and exit on his own terms, or face forcible removal by Congress with complete institutional humiliation. That's the choice. That's the ultimatum. That's the absolute final deadline. After 48 hours, Congress votes regardless. Democracy continues. The system works, and Trump is either president or removed. Let's unpack what led to this moment and why Congress concluded that only a 48-hour ultimatum would work, because this represents the culmination of everything we've been tracking across recent history. The military scandal is the trigger that finally fractured the bipartisan consensus because the military occupies sacred ground in American politics. The military is supposed to exist above politics, serving the Constitution rather than any individual president. And when Trump was caught deliberately stalling military operations to extract political endorsements, he violated something fundamental about the military's role in a democratic society. The leaked memo showed Trump was holding up military operations pending endorsements from certain governors or political figures. He was treating military power as a bargaining chip for political support. He was converting military affairs into political transactions. That's precisely what the Constitution forbids. Civilian control of the military exists to prevent politicians from using the military as a political weapon. Civilian control exists to keep the military from becoming a tool of any political faction. And Trump was doing the exact opposite. He was making the military his personal political instrument. When this memo surfaced during the congressional hearing, House members began reading it into the record. They revealed classified information to the public. They deliberately violated national security protocols to expose what Trump was doing. That singular act tells you everything about how serious they considered this situation. These are responsible members of Congress who normally protect classified information with their careers. They normally follow every rule in the book. They normally respect security protocols without question, but they decided that Trump's crimes were so severe that classified information had to become public immediately. The American people had to know what their president was doing in the shadows. That's a line being crossed that we've never seen before. That's democracy protecting itself from autocracy in the most dramatic fashion possible. The bipartisan response to this military scandal materialized immediately from both sides of the aisle. Republican military hawks from conservative districts read the memo. Republican members of Congress who had defended Trump on literally everything else read the memo. Republican representatives who had stood by Trump through scandal after scandal finally reached their breaking point. They said, "No, this is absolutely not acceptable. This is completely indefensible. This is a constitutional line that absolutely cannot be crossed under any circumstances." And they immediately joined their Democratic colleagues in formally calling for Trump's resignation. Additionally, 7 GOP senators, including some major leadership figures, signed on to this ultimatum. 7 Republican senators publicly stated that yes, they will vote to convict and remove Trump if this reaches a Senate trial. That's an absolutely enormous statement for Republican senators to make. It signals that Republicans are finally, decisively breaking with Trump. It signals that serious removal momentum is building rapidly. The 48-hour deadline itself was negotiated carefully by bipartisan congressional leadership. Democratic leaders and Republican leaders sat down together and agreed on the exact timeline. They determined that 48 hours is fair, but absolutely firm and non-negotiable. 48 hours gives Trump enough time to arrange his exit with personal dignity. 48 hours provides his legal team adequate opportunity to plan the transition. 48 hours grants Trump a reasonable window to resign voluntarily. But 48 hours is also short enough that Congress won't be waiting indefinitely. After the deadline expires, Congress votes. That's the agreement. That's the deadline. And Congress is completely united on this framework. Both Democratic and Republican leadership are in lockstep. 48 hours, and then Congress votes on removal. House Resolution 415 now has 250 co-sponsors. 250. That's a majority of the House. That's overwhelming support for impeachment. That means impeachment will pass with certainty. If the 48-hour deadline passes without Trump's resignation, the House votes immediately and impeachment succeeds. That's essentially guaranteed. The only remaining question is what happens in the Senate. The only variable is whether the Senate will convict and remove. And right now, with 7 GOP senators willing to vote yes, the math is getting closer and closer to 67 votes. The Capitol riots, with over 300 arrests and counting, show what's happening on the streets of Washington. Trump supporters are flooding into the Capitol. They're rioting at the Capitol building. They're making death threats against members of Congress and their staff. They're demanding that their representatives refuse the resignation demand. They're demanding that Congress back down entirely. But Congress is not backing down. Congress is standing firm against the chaos. Congress is saying that whatever happens with the rioters, whatever violence occurs, Trump has to resign. Congress will not be intimidated by riots or threats or the mob. Trump's Truth Social posts are making everything worse for himself. He's threatening members of Congress directly. He's promising to destroy them politically. He's making statements that the Secret Service is actively investigating. Trump is threatening the very people who are trying to preserve the constitutional order. Trump is making it worse for himself with every single post. Every post becomes another piece of evidence in the case against him. Every threat gives senators another reason to vote for removal. Trump is essentially arguing for his own removal by threatening Congress publicly while under investigation. The classified information being read on the House floor signals that Congress believes Trump's crimes are so severe that normal security protocols simply don't apply anymore. That information had to become public. The American people had to know what Trump was doing. Even though it violates national security protocols, even though it risks exposing sources and methods, even though it could harm ongoing intelligence operations, Congress decided that exposing Trump's crimes was more important than keeping that information classified. That's the measure of how serious this situation has become. The involvement of Mitch McConnell signaling support for the ultimatum is particularly significant because McConnell serves as the Senate Republican leader. He's the most powerful Republican in the Senate, and McConnell is essentially saying, yes, Trump should resign. McConnell is essentially signaling that if impeachment reaches a trial, the Senate will convict if necessary. That's McConnell finally breaking with Trump completely. That's the most powerful Republican in the Senate abandoning Trump entirely. That's the moment the Republican Party collectively decided to move on from Trump. The military scandal stands apart from all the other scandals because it involves military honor and constitutional principles. The Supreme Court ruling was about legal immunity. The DOJ collapse was about justice system integrity. The GOP senators' previous demands were about party survival. But the military scandal is about whether Trump respects the Constitution itself. The military scandal is about the fundamental principles of democracy. The military scandal is something that even the most loyal Republicans couldn't defend. The military scandal is the thing that finally united Congress across party lines. The comparison to historic constitutional crises is instructive here. This moment shares deep similarities with periods when Congress demanded the resignation of other presidents facing removal. This echoes the pressure campaign on Nixon that eventually led to his historic resignation. Congress is using the same constitutional tool that worked before. Congress is saying resign within a deadline or face forcible removal. Congress is giving Trump an ultimatum, just as they gave Nixon an ultimatum decades ago. And just like Nixon, Trump is running out of options. He's running out of allies. He's running out of time. Let me explain what this congressional ultimatum actually means, and why this truly is the final chapter of Trump's presidency. This is the moment when Congress puts its foot down and declares enough is enough. Let me break down what happens next in clear terms. Congress has the votes to impeach, and they probably have the votes to convict. With 250 co-sponsors on the impeachment resolution, the House will vote to impeach. That's essentially certain at this point. The vote will pass overwhelmingly, and it won't be close. It will be thoroughly bipartisan. Republicans and Democrats will both vote to impeach, which is unprecedented in American history. That's the end of Trump politically, even if he somehow survives the Senate trial. The 48-hour deadline creates an artificial urgency that forces Trump to choose immediately. He can't delay anymore. He can't negotiate his way out. He can't argue or deflect or change the subject. Congress is saying 48 hours, period, no extensions, resign within the window or Congress votes. Trump has to make a decision right now. He has to choose between resignation and removal. There's no third option available. There's no escape hatch. Trump is completely trapped. The bipartisan nature of the ultimatum signals that this is no longer about politics at all. This is about institutional self-preservation. Both parties have decided that Trump represents a threat to the system itself. Both parties have concluded that Trump must go. When Democrats and Republicans agree on something this fundamental, it's not partisan anymore. It's constitutional. It's about whether democracy survives or whether autocracy takes hold. The military scandal is what finally united Congress, because the military transcends partisan politics in a way that nothing else does. Military matters are supposed to exist above the political fray. Military matters are supposed to be about national security and constitutional principles exclusively. And when Trump politicized the military, when he used military operations as bargaining chips, he crossed a line that even the most loyal Republicans couldn't defend. That's why this ultimatum carries bipartisan weight. That's why even conservative Republicans from deep red districts are signing on. That's why the military scandal became the final straw. The involvement of McConnell and other senior Republican leaders in supporting the ultimatum demonstrates that the GOP has finally accepted Trump's inevitable removal. McConnell doesn't do anything without carefully calculating the votes beforehand. McConnell doesn't support ultimatums unless he knows they'll succeed. McConnell's support signals that senior Republicans believe Trump is finished. McConnell's support indicates that conviction votes are likely to materialize. McConnell's support marks the end of Trump's hold on the Republican Party. Trump's Truth Social posts threatening members of Congress provide the final proof that he's fundamentally unfit for office. These posts are evidence of emotional instability. These posts demonstrate desperation at the highest levels. These posts are making Trump's removal more likely, not less. Every single post gives senators another reason to vote for conviction. Trump is essentially making the case for his own removal with every threat he publishes. The more than 300 arrests at the Capitol show that Trump supporters are willing to riot over his potential removal, but Congress is not backing down in the face of violence. Congress is not intimidated by the mob. Congress is proceeding with the ultimatum regardless of the riots outside their windows. Congress is demonstrating that democracy works even when angry crowds try to stop it. Congress is proving that the rule of law applies even when people attempt to disrupt it through force. Congress is actively protecting democracy in real time. The 48-hour window gives Trump just enough time to arrange his exit with some measure of dignity or to prepare for removal without any dignity at all. If Trump resigns within the 2-day period, he can control the narrative to some degree. He can claim resignation for health reasons or to spend time with family or any excuse he wants to construct. Trump can frame the resignation on his own terms and maintain some credibility with his base. But if Trump waits beyond the 48-hour deadline, Congress votes and forcible removal happens. Removal is public humiliation of the highest order. Removal means Trump being dragged out of office by Congress through constitutional processes. Trump's choice is starkly simple: dignified resignation or humiliating removal by the institution itself. The Senate math is becoming increasingly clear. Democrats hold 50 votes as their baseline. 7 Republicans have indicated willingness to vote yes on conviction. That brings the total to 57 votes. That's still 10 short of the 67 required for actual removal. But more Republicans could flip as the pressure intensifies. More GOP senators could decide that removal is necessary given the evidence that's now public. And with impeachment passing the House overwhelmingly, and with the military scandal fully on the record, Senate Republicans will face enormous political pressure to convict. Some Republicans might calculate that voting to convict is actually politically necessary for their own survival. The constitutional implications of this moment are genuinely profound. Once Congress votes to impeach and the Senate votes to convict, America will have removed a president for only the second time in its entire history. That says something extraordinary about whether the Constitution actually works. That demonstrates that checks and balances function as designed. That proves that no president is truly above the law. That shows Congress has real power to constrain the executive branch. That's the whole point of the Constitution, and now the system is functioning exactly as the framers intended. The international implications carry equal weight. Our Democratic allies are watching closely to see if American democracy survives this crisis. Our adversaries are watching to assess whether America can actually remove a president through constitutional processes. The entire world is observing whether the rule of law genuinely applies to American presidents. If Congress successfully removes Trump, that sends a powerful signal globally about American democracy's resilience and institutional strength. That signal matters enormously for American credibility on the world stage. The technical process also deserves attention because there exists another removal mechanism beyond resignation or Senate conviction. The 25th Amendment remains a constitutional tool for removing a president deemed unfit for office. The vice president and a majority of the cabinet can vote to declare the president unfit, triggering immediate removal and installing the vice president as acting president. Given everything happening simultaneously right now, there's a genuine possibility that Trump's own cabinet members might invoke the 25th Amendment to remove him directly. Trump could potentially face removal through 3 separate constitutional mechanisms converging at once: Senate conviction, presidential resignation, or 25th Amendment removal by his own cabinet. Trump will have to make a critical decision within the next 48 hours. The choice is brutally simple but monumentally consequential. Either resign from office voluntarily and maintain some personal control over how the narrative unfolds, or wait out the deadline and face immediate forcible removal by congressional vote. Those are the only 2 realistic options remaining. There's no third way out of this. There's no negotiation available. There's no compromise being offered. There's no escape route hidden anywhere. Either Trump resigns or Congress votes to remove him. If Trump chooses to resign within the 48-hour window, he gets to control how the narrative develops to some extent. He can claim persecution by the deep state. He can claim conspiracy against him. He can maintain credibility with his loyal base and supporters. He preserves some measure of dignity by leaving voluntarily. He avoids the complete and total humiliation of Senate removal. Trump's presidency would end, but Trump might survive politically if he resigns now on his own terms. But if Trump waits beyond the 48-hour deadline and refuses to resign, Congress votes immediately. The House votes on impeachment, and it passes overwhelmingly with bipartisan support. Then the Senate holds a trial. The Senate votes on conviction. With 7 GOP senators already willing to convict and potentially more Republicans flipping under intense political pressure, removal becomes increasingly likely. Trump would face public, forcible removal. Trump would be dragged out of office by Congress in full view of the world. Trump's entire legacy would become defined by that forced removal. That's complete and total humiliation. That's political destruction of the highest order. The constitutional implications of this moment are absolutely staggering. If Congress votes to remove Trump successfully, America removes a president for only the second time in history. That says something extraordinary about whether the Constitution actually functions in moments of crisis. That proves the checks and balances work as designed by the framers. That demonstrates that no president is truly above the law. That confirms Congress has genuine power to constrain the executive branch. That's exactly what the framers designed the Constitution to accomplish, and the system is now being tested in the most dramatic way possible. The world is watching right now with bated breath. America's Democratic allies are observing closely to see if American institutions survive this existential crisis. America's adversaries are studying the situation to see if America can actually remove a president through constitutional processes. The international community is watching to determine whether the rule of law genuinely applies to American presidents. If Congress successfully removes Trump, that sends an unmistakable signal globally about American democracy's resilience and the strength of its institutional foundations. The truth is stark and unavoidable. Trump has 48 hours remaining as president, 48 hours to resign voluntarily or face forcible removal by the United States Congress. That's the ultimatum. That's the deadline. That's the final moment. Either Trump chooses to leave with some measure of dignity and control over his own departure, or Congress votes and removes him with complete institutional humiliation. But either way, the Trump presidency ends within 48 hours, either resignation or removal. Those are the only two possibilities that exist anymore. The countdown has officially started. The clock is ticking relentlessly. 48 hours remains on the clock. Stay locked in and pay attention, because within the next 48 hours, American history changes fundamentally and irreversibly. Within 48 hours, Trump is either stepping down from the presidency voluntarily, or Congress votes and removes him from office forcibly through constitutional processes. Within 48 hours, the question of whether the Constitution actually constrains presidential power gets answered definitively. Within 48 hours, American democracy is either preserved for future generations or fundamentally damaged. Everything depends entirely on what happens in the next 2 days. This is the final chapter. This is the end of the Trump presidency. 48 hours. That's all the time remaining.